Miles out in the sea lanes, where the North Sea meets the English Channel, a lone ship on the horizon. The cargo it carries tells a murky tale, one which takes us from the Arctic Ocean north of Siberia to the shores of Europe and eventually to the front lines of the war in Ukraine.
We aim to reduce this dependency on Russian fossil fuels and to get rid of it.
To wean ourselves off dependence on Russian oil and gas.
But this is the story of what really happened after Europe promised to end its reliance on Russian gas.
Stop the war, respect international order.
We are determined to stand up against Russia's brutal war.
Because it turns out Europe isn't just helping Ukraine, but also helping fund Putin. I've come to Belgium, to the port of Zeebrugge, one of the biggest liquefied natural gas, LNG, terminals in Europe. On the hunt for the energy story no one wants to talk about. Because while the amount of gas coming in pipes from Russia is down, the amount of gas coming in on LNG tankers is up a lot. And this is one of those tankers, a ship I've been tracking for months, the Vladimir Renov.
Steve, we're getting closer now. That ship was in Siberia 7 days ago, and it's heading to Zeebrugge with its shipment of liquefied natural gas for the European market. And if you want to understand how it is that Vladimir Putin is able to finance his war effort, well, what you're looking at there is part of the explanation.
Britain has banned these shipments, but the UK is also a part of this for another reason.
You know the most striking thing of all? That ship is actually insured by a British company. In other words, it's thanks to British financiers that Vladimir Putin is able to keep sending Russian gas to Europe, earning billions of euros along the way for his war effort.
While British insurers are banned from protecting oil tankers taking Russian crude, there's no equivalent sanction on Russian gas. The UK P&I Club, which insures the Vladimir Renov and a number of other LNG carriers, said the direct carriage of LNG from Yamal to Zeebrugge and provision of insurance services for such carriage is not presently sanctioned. If the EU and G7 nations were to change their policy, the club would of course comply by adjusting or withdrawing its services. Down the coast in Dunkirk is another tanker I've been tracking, the Yakov-Gakel. And it's a similar story, European money and British services facilitating the ongoing flow of Russian hydrocarbons. Except here, the British connection is even more direct.
This ship, it's got a Russian name, it's got Russian gas, but it's actually part-owned and operated by a British company.
Our investigation shows that while Britain has banned any ships with a Russian connection from docking on our shores, this country is still a critical cog in the wheel that helps keep them running. These ships are just two of a large fleet of icebreakers making the same journey from Siberia to Western European ports.
So we've been constantly tracking these ships as they go back and forth. So that green thing there, that is Yamal. That's basically where the Russian liquefied natural gas actually gets liquefied and gets put into these tankers. All the time, it's this constant trade back and forth, Russia to Europe, Russia to Europe.
And Seapeak, the British company behind the Yakov-Gakel, also operates 4 more of these tankers. We tried emailing them and calling them,
Glasgow reception is currently unavailable.
to no avail.
Please leave a message after the tone.
If at this stage you're thinking, didn't Europe stop its imports of Russian fossil fuels? The answer is yes when it comes to coal and to oil. After sanctions, they are now mostly going to China. But Europe is still the biggest customer by far for Russian liquefied natural gas, paying billions of euros to the very country on which they're waging economic war. And while it this week imposed sanctions on LNG, that will only affect the stuff being shipped via Europe, not the gas going to Europe. And while the UK didn't receive this LNG directly, its businesses helped it happen. That brings us to Glasgow, where our trail that began in the Channel has led us. CPIRC, the company which runs that tanker, didn't respond to my calls, so I've come in person to see if I can persuade them to talk.
Hi, hello. Hi, my name's Ed Conway. I work for Sky News, and we've come to talk to CPIRC. We're making a story. Do you want him to turn that off? Okay, right. Okay, we'll turn that off. Or do you want to go outside? Yeah. We've been calling, and we have been told that, well, no one is replying to us, and so that's why we've come here.
Stay there, Bobby, please.
Sure. Thank you.
It's worth saying, as far as we can tell, there's nothing illegal about running these tankers, even though they're helping bolster the Russian regime. It's one of many loopholes in Britain's sanctions regime. Even so, the company running the vessels still not willing to speak.
They've given you a message to me, which is basically go away, is it?
You don't have an appointment where you can speak to them.
Right, okay. Is anyone going to come down and talk to us?
No.
No? And even if we stay here all day and we're waiting,
I'll phone the police.
You'll phone the police? Well, basically, they don't want to talk. They say no one can speak to them without an appointment. We've called, and they haven't wanted to give us an appointment, so I guess that's just they don't want to talk about it at all, which is kind of disappointing.
And for the time being, that is more or less that.
We must help Ukraine to rise from the ashes and to be the master of its own future.
Europe keeps importing Russian gas in ships managed and insured by British companies, paying the Putin regime billions of euros in the process. Russia keeps bombing Ukraine with weapons paid for in part from the proceeds. Few find this very palatable, but since the alternative is to risk another energy price shock, there's little appetite to end this murky trade.